Marcus Webb never imagined that offering a phone charger to a stranded stranger would transform his failing peach farm into the most talked-about destination in 3 counties. The woman seemed ordinary enough, dusty hiking boots and a worn backpack, but she carried something far more powerful than he realized, the ability to turn his simple act of kindness into a story that would reach millions. As tour buses now roll down his dirt driveway and grant checks arrive in his mailbox, one question lingers in the warm Georgia air. How did a cup of sweet tea and a few shared stories change everything? Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Marcus Webb's peach orchard, each tree standing like a weathered sentinel in the fading light. The branches, which should have been heavy with fruit by now, bore only scattered peaches, most no bigger than golf balls, and already showing signs of the drought that had plagued central Georgia for the better part of 3 months. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his work glove, leaving a streak of dirt across his weathered skin as he surveyed the rows of struggling trees that represented 4 generations of his family's legacy. The Webb farm had been in his family since 1892, passed down from father to son, with the understanding that the land would provide as long as they cared for it properly. His great-grandfather had planted the first peach trees with his own hands, clearing the red clay soil stone by stone. His grandfather had expanded the orchard during the Great Depression, somehow managing to keep food on the table when other farms around them failed. His father had modernized the operation in the 1960s, installing irrigation systems and bringing in new varieties of peaches that could withstand the unpredictable southern weather. Now it was Marcus's turn to carry the torch, and he was failing miserably. At 43 years old, he found himself facing the very real possibility that he might be the Webb who lost it all. The drought had been merciless, turning his usually lush fields into cracked earth that resembled a moonscape more than fertile farmland. The irrigation system his father had installed decades ago was showing its age, breaking down more often than it ran, and the cost of repairs was eating into money he didn't have. His wife Sarah had left him 2 years ago, taking their daughter Emma with her to Atlanta, where she said Emma could have a better life, better schools, better opportunities than what a failing peach farm could provide. The divorce papers had cited irreconcilable differences, but Marcus knew the truth was simpler and more painful than that. Sarah had lost faith in his ability to make the farm work, lost faith in him. She'd grown tired of the constant worry about money, tired of watching him pour every dollar they had into equipment that kept breaking down and trees that kept producing less each year. The farmhouse, a 2-story structure built in 1923 with white clapboard siding and a wraparound porch, had grown quiet without the sound of Emma's laughter echoing through its rooms. The silence was particularly oppressive in the evenings when Marcus would sit on the front porch, drinking sweet tea and listening to the crickets, while trying not to think about the stack of overdue bills sitting on his kitchen table. Tonight was shaping up to be another one of those evenings. Marcus had spent the day checking his irrigation lines, finding 3 more breaks that would need expensive repairs he couldn't afford. The bank had called twice this week about his late mortgage payment, and the supplier who provided his fertilizer had started demanding cash up front instead of extending credit. Every direction he turned seemed to lead to another financial dead end. As he walked back toward the house, his boots crunching on the dry grass, Marcus caught sight of movement near the road that bordered his property. A figure was walking along the shoulder, moving slowly in the heat with what appeared to be a heavy backpack. The person seemed to be struggling, stopping frequently and looking around as if lost or searching for something. Marcus had been raised with old-fashioned Southern hospitality, the kind that demanded you help a stranger in need regardless of your own circumstances. His grandmother used to say that kindness was free to give and priceless to receive, and even though times were hard, he couldn't ignore someone who might be in trouble. He changed direction and walked toward the road, his long strides covering the distance quickly. As he got closer, he could see that the figure was a woman, probably in her 30s, with shoulder-length brown hair pulled back in a ponytail and wearing dusty hiking boots that had clearly seen better days. She was carrying a large backpack and had a camera hanging around her neck. What caught his attention most, however, was the expression of frustration on her face as she stared down at what appeared to be a dead phone in her hand. "Excuse me, ma'am," Marcus called out as he approached, his voice carrying the gentle drawl that marked him as a lifelong Georgian. "You look like you might be having some trouble. Is there anything I can help you with?" The woman looked up, and Marcus was struck by her eyes, a deep green that reminded him of the pine forests that covered the hills north of his farm. She had an intelligent face, the kind that suggested she was used to asking questions and finding answers, but right now, she looked genuinely worried. "Oh, thank goodness," she said, her accent suggesting she wasn't from the South. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I think I'm completely lost. My phone died about an hour ago, and I have no idea where I am or how to get back to the main highway. I was hiking on what I thought was a marked trail, but somehow I ended up here." Marcus glanced around, trying to orient himself from her perspective. His farm was about 5 miles off the main highway, connected by a series of back roads that could indeed be confusing to someone unfamiliar with the area. The trail she was probably referring to was an old hiking path that meandered through the state forest land that bordered several local farms, including his own. "You're about 5 miles from Highway 4041, he explained, gesturing in the direction of the main road. "The trail you were on probably connects to the old logging roads that run through here. It's easy to get turned around if you don't know the area." He paused, taking in her obvious exhaustion and the heavy pack she was carrying. "Look, it's getting dark, and those roads can be tricky even in daylight. Why don't you come up to the house and charge your phone? I can give you directions once you get your bearings." The woman hesitated for a moment, and Marcus could see her weighing her options. He supposed he couldn't blame her for being cautious about accepting help from a stranger, especially out here in the middle of nowhere. He was a big man, standing just over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders built from years of farm work, and he probably looked intimidating, covered in dirt and sweat from his day in the fields. "I promise I'm harmless," he added with a gentle smile. "Just a farmer who was raised to help folks in need. My name's Marcus Webb, and this is my family's peach farm. You're welcome to sit on the porch while your phone charges, and I'll make sure you have clear directions before Habeles. You head out." Something in his tone must have reassured her, because she smiled back, the worry lines around her eyes relaxing slightly. "I'm Isabella Rodriguez," she said, shifting her backpack to extend her hand for a shake. "And I would be incredibly grateful for the help. I was starting to worry I'd have to sleep out here tonight." Marcus shook her hand, noting the firm grip and the calluses that suggested she was no stranger to outdoor activities. "Well, we can't have that," he said. "Come on up to the house. I've got sweet tea in the refrigerator and a charger that should work with most phones." As they walked up the dirt driveway toward the farmhouse, Isabella looked around with obvious interest, taking in the rows of peach trees and the various outbuildings that dotted the property. Marcus found himself seeing his farm through her eyes, noticing details he'd become blind to through familiarity. The barn that needed a new coat of paint, the equipment shed with the sagging roof, the vegetable garden his grandmother had started that he still maintained more out of habit than necessity. "This is beautiful," Isabella said as they approached the house. "How long has your family owned this land?" "Since 1892, Marcus replied, feeling a familiar mixture of pride and pressure that always came with that particular piece of family history. "My great-grandfather cleared this land by hand and planted the first peach trees. It's been passed down through 4 generations now." "That's incredible," Isabella said, and Marcus could hear genuine admiration in her voice. "There's something special about land that's been in a family for that long. You must have some amazing stories." Marcus felt a pang of sadness at her words, thinking about how those stories might end with him if he couldn't find a way to save the farm. But he pushed those dark thoughts aside and focused on being a good host. "I suppose I do," he said as they climbed the steps to the front porch. "Have a seat wherever you're comfortable. I'll grab that sweet tea and find you a charger." The front porch was furnished with a collection of mismatched chairs and a small table that Marcus had built himself from reclaimed barn wood. Isabella chose a rocking chair that had belonged to his grandmother, sitting her backpack down beside it with obvious relief. As she settled into the chair, Marcus caught sight of the professional-looking camera she was carrying, and wondered if she might be some kind of photographer or journalist. Though he didn't want to pry, he disappeared into the house and returned a few minutes later with 2 tall glasses of sweet tea, ice cubes clinking against the sides, and a phone charger he grabbed from the kitchen. The tea was made according to his grandmother's recipe, sweet enough to make your teeth ache, but perfectly refreshing on a hot Georgia evening. "Here you go," he said, handing Isabella a glass and plugging the charger into an outlet near her chair. "This should work with most phones. Just help yourself." Isabella accepted the tea gratefully and took a long sip, closing her eyes with apparent pleasure. "This is delicious," she said. "I haven't had real sweet tea like this in years. Most places I travel serve that artificial stuff that doesn't come close to the real thing." "My grandmother's recipe," Marcus said, settling into the chair across from her. "She always said the secret was in the timing, when you add the sugar to the tea while it's still hot enough to dissolve properly, but not so hot that it makes the tea bitter." As Isabella plugged in her phone and it came back to life, Marcus found himself genuinely curious about this stranger who had wandered onto his property. "So what brings you to this part of Georgia?" he asked. "Are you here on vacation?" Isabella smiled, and Marcus noticed that her whole face lit up when she did. "You could say that. I'm a travel writer, actually. I specialize in finding hidden gems, places that most people don't know about but are worth visiting. I was researching some of the hiking trails in this area for a piece I'm working on about off-the-beaten-path destinations in the South." Marcus felt a flicker of interest. A travel writer might be able to give him some perspective on his situation, might know something about agritourism or ways to bring visitors to rural areas. "That sounds like an interesting job," he said. "Do you travel all over the country?" "All over the world, actually," Isabella replied. "I write for several different publications, including Southern Living, Travel Plus Leisure, and National Geographic Traveler. I've been doing this for about 8 years now, and I love it. There's something magical about discovering a place that hasn't been commercialized yet, where you can still experience authentic culture and genuine hospitality." Marcus felt a pang of envy at the freedom her lifestyle represented. When was the last time he'd traveled anywhere beyond the county line? When was the last time he'd had the luxury of exploring new places, just for the joy of discovery? His world had shrunk to the boundaries of his farm, and lately, even that felt like it was closing in on him. "That does sound magical," he said, taking a sip of his tea. "I can't remember the last time I went anywhere new. This farm keeps me pretty tied down." Isabella studied his face with those perceptive green eyes, and Marcus had the feeling she was seeing more than he intended to reveal. "How are things going with the farm?" she asked gently. "I couldn't help but notice that some of the trees look like they're struggling." Marcus felt his defenses rise instinctively. He'd grown tired of people asking about the farm, tired of having to explain why it wasn't thriving like it used to, tired of seeing pity in their eyes when they realized how bad things had gotten. But something about Isabella's tone suggested genuine interest rather than nosiness, and he found himself answering more honestly than he had in months. "We're going through a rough patch," he admitted, surprising himself with his candor. "The drought has been brutal this year, and my irrigation system is older than I am. I keep fixing one thing, and 2 more things break. The peach market isn't what it used to be either. The big commercial operations can produce fruit cheaper than I can, and most people buy their peaches at the grocery store now instead of coming out to farms like mine." Isabella nodded thoughtfully. "I've seen that happening all over the country. Small family farms are struggling to compete with industrial agriculture. But there's also a growing movement of people who want to support local farmers and experience authentic agricultural tourism. Have you ever considered opening your farm to visitors?" Marcus almost laughed at the suggestion. Who would want to visit a failing peach farm in the middle of nowhere? "I can barely keep the place running, let alone entertain tourists." "You'd be surprised," Isabella said, leaning forward in her chair with growing enthusiasm. "Some of my most popular articles have been about places exactly like this. People are hungry for authentic experiences, for the chance to connect with real farmers and learn about where their food comes from. They want to hear the stories, to understand the history and the challenges." As if to illustrate her point, Isabella picked up her camera and gestured toward the orchard. "Look at this place through a visitor's eyes. You've got a beautiful farmhouse that's been in your family for over a century. You've got rows of peach trees that tell the story of Southern agriculture. You've got generations of knowledge and experience. Most importantly, you've got genuine hospitality, the kind that made you invite a complete stranger to sit on your porch and share your sweet tea. Marcus felt a flutter of something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope maybe, or at least curiosity. But what would people actually do here? I mean, if they came to visit? Isabella's eyes lit up as she warmed to the subject. They could pick peaches when they're in season. Learn about how the farm has evolved over the generations. Taste your grandmother's sweet tea recipe. Hear the stories about your family's history with the land. You could offer tours of the orchard, maybe even simple accommodations if you wanted to go that route. People pay good money for farm-to-table experiences and agritourism. The conversation continued as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected off the windows of the farmhouse. Marcus found himself sharing stories he hadn't told in years. Tales his grandfather had passed down about the early days of the farm, about surviving the Great Depression and the various challenges each generation had faced. Isabella listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking follow-up questions that drew out even more details. She told him about her own travels, describing family farms in Italy, where 3-course meals were served under grape arbors, small vineyards in France, where visitors could participate in the harvest, agricultural cooperatives in South America, where traditional farming methods were being preserved and celebrated. As she talked, Marcus began to see his own farm differently. Not as a failing business, but as a repository of history and knowledge that might have value beyond just producing peaches. The thing is, Isabella said as they watched fireflies begin to dance among the peach trees, authenticity can't be manufactured. You can't fake the kind of history this place represents, or the genuine hospitality you've shown me tonight. Those are the things that make a place special, that make people want to visit and then tell their friends about it. Marcus felt something shifting inside him, a loosening of the despair that had been his constant companion for months. I never thought about it that way, he admitted. I'd been so focused on trying to make the farm profitable in the traditional sense that I never considered there might be other ways to make it work. As the evening wore on, Isabella's phone had fully charged, and she'd been able to contact the hotel where she was supposed to be staying, letting them know she was safe and would be there later that night. But neither of them seemed eager to end the conversation. There was something magical about sitting on that old porch, sharing stories and sweet tea, while the Georgia night settled around them like a comfortable blanket. I should probably let you get me those directions, Isabella finally said with obvious reluctance. It's getting late, and I don't want to impose on your hospitality any longer. You're not imposing at all, Marcus said, and he meant it. This was the best evening he'd had, in longer than he could remember. But you're right about it getting late. The roads around here can be tricky in the dark. He gave her detailed directions back to the main highway, even drawing a rough map on a piece of paper so she wouldn't get lost again. As she packed up her things and prepared to leave, Isabella paused and looked back at the farmhouse one more time. Marcus, she said, her voice serious now, I want you to know that what you've shared with me tonight has been truly special. The stories about your family, the history of this place, the way you've welcomed a stranger into your home. This is exactly the kind of authentic experience that people are looking for. I hope you'll consider what we talked about. Marcus walked her down to the road where she'd left her rental car, which she'd apparently parked in a small turnout about a quarter-mile from his driveway. As they said their goodbyes, Isabella handed him a business card with her contact information. If you ever decide you want to explore the agritourism idea, give me a call, she said. I'd be happy to help you brainstorm ways to make it work. Marcus watched her taillights disappear into the darkness, then walked slowly back to the house, her business card still in his hand. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt something other than dread when he thought about the future of his farm. It wasn't a solution to his immediate problems. The bills would still be there in the morning. The irrigation system would still need repairs. The peach trees would still be struggling. But it was a possibility, a different way of thinking about what the farm could be. That night, instead of lying awake worrying about money, Marcus found himself thinking about Isabella's stories of other farms that had successfully transitioned to agritourism. He imagined families picking peaches in his orchard, children learning about agriculture, visitors sitting on his porch listening to the same stories his grandfather had told him. It seemed almost too good to be true, but the seed of an idea had been planted. The next few days passed in their usual routine of farm work and financial worries, but Marcus found his thoughts returning frequently to his conversation with Isabella. He began to notice things about his farm that he'd taken for granted, details that might be interesting to visitors. The old barn still had some of the original tools his great-grandfather had used. The farmhouse contained furniture and photographs that documented 4 generations of his family's life on the land. Even the struggling peach trees had stories to tell about the challenges of farming and the persistence required to work the land. A week after Isabella's visit, Marcus was checking his email when he found a message from her. She was writing to thank him again for his hospitality and to let him know that she was working on an article that might mention his farm. She asked if it would be okay to include some of the stories he'd shared with her, assuring him that she would be respectful of his privacy and would focus on the positive aspects of his family's agricultural heritage. Marcus stared at the email for a long time before responding. The idea of his farm being written about in a national magazine was both exciting and terrifying. What if people actually read the article and wanted to visit? What if they were disappointed by what they found? What if he wasn't ready to deal with visitors and ended up embarrassing himself? But then he thought about the stack of unpaid bills on his kitchen table and the letter from the bank that had arrived that morning, threatening foreclosure if he didn't bring his mortgage current within 30 days. He didn't have the luxury of being cautious anymore. If there was even a small chance that Isabella's article could help save his farm, he had to take it. He wrote back giving her permission to mention the farm in her article and asking if she had any specific advice about preparing for potential visitors. Her response came quickly, full of practical suggestions about small improvements he could make that would enhance the visitor experience without requiring a huge investment. She recommended creating a simple walking tour of the property, perhaps with a few signs explaining the history of different areas. She suggested highlighting the farmhouse's historical features and maybe offering samples of his grandmother's sweet tea recipe to visitors. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus threw himself into implementing Isabella's suggestions with an energy he hadn't felt in years. He repaired the front steps of the farmhouse and gave the porch a fresh coat of paint. He created simple wooden signs for a self-guided tour of the property, describing the history of the peach orchard, the significance of various buildings, and the farming techniques his family had used over the generations. He even put together a small display in the barn showcasing some of the antique farming tools and photographs from the farm's early days. The work was satisfying in a way that his usual farm maintenance wasn't. Instead of just trying to keep things from falling apart, he was improving them, preparing them to be shared with others. For the first time in months, he felt like he was moving forward instead of just treading water. 3 weeks after Isabella's visit, Marcus received a phone call that would change everything. The voice on the other end was excited, almost breathless with enthusiasm. "Mr. Webb? This is Jennifer Patterson from Southern Living magazine. I'm calling about the article Isabella Rodriguez wrote about your farm. It's absolutely wonderful, and we're planning to feature it in our next issue. I wanted to reach out to let you know it's coming and to see if you'd be available for a follow-up interview." Marcus felt his heart start to race. "An article about my farm in Southern Living?" "Oh yes," Jennifer continued. "Isabella's piece is called Hidden Gems, the authentic heart of Southern agriculture, and your farm is the centerpiece. She painted such a beautiful picture of your family's history and the hospitality you showed her. Our readers are going to love it." After he hung up the phone, Marcus sat in his kitchen staring at the wall, trying to process what had just happened. Southern Living was one of the most widely read magazines in the region, with a circulation in the millions. If even a small percentage of their readers were interested in visiting his farm, he could be looking at more visitors than he'd ever imagined. The magazine hit the stands on a Thursday morning in late July. Marcus had driven to town early to buy several copies, his hands shaking slightly as he opened to the article for the first time. What he found took his breath away. Isabella had written about his farm with a poet's eye for detail and a journalist's skill for storytelling. She described the way the late afternoon sun cast golden light through the peach trees, the taste of his grandmother's sweet tea on a hot summer evening. The sense of stepping back in time when walking through his farmhouse, filled with 4 generations of family history. She had woven together the stories he'd shared with her into a narrative that made his struggling farm sound like a magical place where visitors could connect with the authentic spirit of Southern agriculture. The article wasn't just about his farm. It was part of a larger piece about small family farms throughout the South that were preserving traditional ways of life in the face of modern challenges. But his farm was featured prominently, with a full-page photograph of the farmhouse at sunset and several smaller images showing the peach orchard and the inside of his barn with its display of antique farming tools. Most importantly, Isabella had included practical information for potential visitors, noting that the farm offered self-guided tours by appointment and that visitors could sample the famous sweet tea while learning about 4 generations of peach farming history. She had somehow managed to make his small operation sound both intimate and professional, accessible but special. The first call came that afternoon. A family from Atlanta wanted to know if they could visit the following weekend and bring their 2 young children to see the farm and pick peaches. Marcus, still reeling from seeing his farm in print, stammered out a yes and hastily made arrangements to meet them on Saturday morning. By the end of the week, he'd received more than 20 calls from people wanting to visit the farm. Some were families looking for a day trip. Others were couples interested in a romantic getaway in a rural setting. A few were travel bloggers who wanted to write their own articles about the farm after reading Isabella's piece. That first Saturday with visitors was both exhilarating and terrifying. The Atlanta family arrived right on time. Parents and 2 children who seemed genuinely excited to be visiting a real working farm. Marcus led them on the tour he'd created, sharing stories about his family's history and explaining how peach farming had evolved over the decades. The children were fascinated by the old farming tools in the barn and delighted by the opportunity to pick their own peaches directly from the trees. When the family sat on his front porch afterward, drinking sweet tea and eating fresh peaches, Marcus felt a profound sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with money. These people were genuinely enjoying themselves, genuinely interested in his family's story, genuinely appreciative of the experience he was providing. The children asked dozens of questions about farm life, and their parents took photographs of everything from the farmhouse to the peach trees to the old tools in the barn. As they were leaving, the father pressed $40 into Marcus's hand, saying it was the best family outing they'd had all summer. It wasn't a fortune, but it was $40 more than Marcus had expected to make that day, and it came from sharing something he loved with people who appreciated it. Word spread quickly. Isabella's article had given his farm credibility, but the positive experiences of those first visitors created a word-of-mouth buzz that proved even more powerful. People posted photos of their visits on social media, wrote glowing reviews on travel websites, and recommended the farm to their friends and family. Within a month of the article's publication, Marcus was hosting visitors almost every weekend. He had to create a simple booking system to manage the demand, and he raised his tour fee to $20 per person, which visitors seemed happy to pay for what they consistently described as authentic and memorable experience. The additional income was a godsend, but the real transformation was in Marcus himself. He rediscovered his love for the farm through the eyes of his visitors, remembered why his family had been drawn to this land in the first place, and found a new sense of purpose in preserving and sharing his agricultural heritage. The success of the agritourism venture also had practical benefits for the farming operation itself. With more steady income from visitors, Marcus was able to make some of the repairs to his irrigation system that he'd been putting off. Better irrigation meant healthier peach trees, which impressed visitors and also improved his actual peach harvest. 3 months after Isabella's article was published, Marcus received another life-changing phone call. This time, it was from the Georgia Department of Agriculture, informing him that he'd been selected to receive a grant for small farms transitioning to agritourism. The grant, worth $15,000, was specifically designed to help family farms like his develop sustainable visitor programs while maintaining their agricultural operations. The grant money allowed Marcus to make significant improvements to his visitor facilities. He renovated a section of his barn into a proper welcome center, with historical displays, and a small gift shop where visitors could buy fresh peaches, homemade preserves, and other local products. He improved the parking area and added restroom facilities, making the farm more accessible to families with children and older visitors. As fall arrived and the peach season ended, Marcus worried that visitor interest might decline. Instead, he found that people were drawn to the farm's autumn beauty, interested in learning about how farmers prepare for winter and what life is like during the off-season. He began offering seasonal tours that focused on different aspects of farm life throughout the year. The transformation wasn't just financial, it was personal. Marcus found himself looking forward to each day in a way he hadn't for years. He loved sharing his family's stories with visitors, loved seeing children experience a working farm for the first time, loved the way couples and families bonded over the simple pleasure of picking fruit and drinking sweet tea on his front porch. His relationship with his ex-wife Sarah began to improve as well. When she saw the articles being written about the farm and heard Emma talking excitedly about all the visitors who came to see Daddy's farm, Sarah began to understand that Marcus had found a way to honor his family's legacy while also building a sustainable future. She started bringing Emma to visit more frequently, and their daughter delighted in serving as an unofficial tour guide, sharing stories about her great-great-grandfather who had cleared the land by hand. By the end of his first year as an agritourism destination, Marcus had hosted over 500 visitors and generated enough additional income to not only catch up on his overdue bills, but also to start saving for future improvements to the farm. More importantly, he'd rediscovered his sense of purpose and pride in his family's agricultural heritage. The relationship with Isabella had evolved into a genuine friendship. She visited the farm several times throughout the year, sometimes bringing other travel writers who were interested in featuring the farm in their own articles. Each new piece of coverage brought more visitors and helped establish the farm's reputation as a must-visit destination for people interested in authentic Southern agriculture. Isabella was also instrumental in helping Marcus connect with other farmers who had successfully transitioned to agritourism. Through her network, he met farm owners from across the Southeast who shared advice, resources, and strategies for balancing agricultural production with visitor programs. These connections helped him refine his own approach and avoid some of the common pitfalls that new agritourism operators sometimes encountered. As his second year in the agritourism business began, Marcus started receiving invitations to speak at agricultural conferences and farm-to-table events about his experience transitioning from traditional Bass farming to agritourism. These speaking engagements not only provided additional income, but also helped establish him as a thought leader in the sustainable agriculture movement. The farm's success attracted the attention of the State Tourism Board, which featured the Webb farm in their official travel guide and included it in several promotional campaigns highlighting authentic Georgia experiences. This official recognition brought even more visitors and helped legitimize the farm as a serious tourist destination rather than just a curiosity. Marcus also began partnering with local restaurants and farmers markets, supplying them with fresh peaches and other products, while also referring visitors to these other local businesses. These partnerships created a network of mutual support that benefited the entire local agricultural community. The physical improvements to the farm continued as well. Marcus used his increased income to replace his aging irrigation system with a modern, efficient setup that not only improved his peach production, but also served as an educational tool for visitors interested in learning about sustainable farming practices. He added solar panels to reduce his energy costs and demonstrate his commitment to environmental responsibility, something that resonated strongly with many of his visitors. The farmhouse itself became a showcase of rural Georgia history, with each room containing displays and artifacts that told the story of his family's 4 generations on the land. Visitors particularly enjoyed the kitchen, where Marcus had preserved his grandmother's original wood-burning stove alongside modern appliances, creating a visual timeline of how domestic life on the farm had evolved over the decades. As word of the farm's success spread, Marcus began receiving inquiries from agricultural students and researchers who wanted to study his transition from traditional farming to agritourism. These academic connections led to partnerships with nearby universities, bringing student groups to the farm for educational tours, and sometimes hosting research projects focused on sustainable agriculture and rural tourism. The success also brought unexpected personal rewards. Marcus found himself dating again for the first time since his divorce, meeting a teacher from a nearby town who had visited the farm with her class and returned on her own to learn more about sustainable agriculture. Their relationship developed slowly, built on shared values about education, environmental stewardship, and the importance of preserving rural traditions. Emma, now spending summers at the farm, took on an increasingly active role in the agritourism operation. At 12 years old, she was a natural storyteller who loved sharing family history with visitors and had developed her own tour, focused specifically on children and families. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and many visitors commented that her presentation was one of the highlights of their visit. The financial stability that agritourism provided also allowed Marcus to expand his agricultural operations in new directions. He planted a small vineyard that would eventually produce grapes for a local winery, added a vegetable garden that supplied fresh produce for farm-to-table dinners he occasionally hosted for special groups, and even started raising heritage breed chickens that both provided eggs for his family and served as an educational attraction for visitors interested in traditional farming practices. As his third year in the agritourism business began, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed since that evening when Isabella had knocked on his door asking to charge her phone. What had started as a simple act of hospitality had transformed not just his farm, but his entire outlook on life. The farm that had once felt like a burden, a failing legacy that he was destined to lose, had become a thriving business that honored his family's history while building a sustainable future. More than that, it had given him a sense of purpose and connection that he'd been missing for years. Every day brought new visitors with their own stories, their own curiosity about farm life, their own appreciation for the simple pleasures of fresh peaches and sweet tea on a summer evening. Marcus often thought about what might have happened if he'd been too tired or too discouraged that evening to help a stranger in need. Isabella might have found her way back to the highway eventually, but she never would have experienced the hospitality that inspired her article. And his farm never would have been discovered by the thousands of visitors who had since walked his orchards and sat on his front porch. The transformation wasn't just about the money, though the financial stability was certainly important. It was about rediscovering the value in what he'd always had, seeing his family's legacy through fresh eyes, and finding new ways to honor the past while building for the future. The peach trees that had once seemed like a burden were now a source of joy, not just for the fruit they produced, but for the stories they enabled him to tell and the experiences they allowed him to share. As he sat on his front porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky behind his peach trees, while a family from Tennessee enjoyed sweet tea and fresh peaches at the table he'd built from reclaimed barnwood, Marcus felt a deep sense of gratitude for the chain of events that had brought him to this moment. It had started with a simple phone charger and a glass of sweet tea, but it had become something much larger, a celebration of agricultural heritage, a showcase of Southern hospitality, and a testament to the power of seeing opportunity in unexpected places. The Webb family farm, which had survived the Great Depression, 2 world wars, countless droughts and economic challenges, was not only surviving but thriving in its 4th generation. The future that had once seemed so uncertain now stretched ahead with promise, built on the foundation of stories shared, hospitality extended, and the simple but profound act of opening his door to a stranger in need. Isabella continued to visit the farm regularly, often bringing other travel writers and photographers who helped spread the word about this hidden gem in rural Georgia. She had become more than just the journalist who had discovered his farm. She had become a trusted friend, an advisor who helped Marcus navigate the challenges and opportunities that came with his newfound success. During one of her visits in late spring, Isabella brought exciting news. National Geographic Traveler wanted to feature the Webb farm in a major article about agritourism destinations across America. The piece would reach an international audience and could potentially bring visitors from around the world to his small Georgia farm. "Are you ready for that level of attention?" Isabella asked as they sat on the familiar front porch, glasses of sweet tea in hand, watching the sunset through the peach trees that were now heavy with fruit thanks to the improved irrigation system. Marcus considered the question carefully. 3 years ago, the idea of international visitors would have terrified him. Now, while still somewhat daunting, it felt like a natural progression of the journey he'd been on since that evening. when Isabella had first appeared on his property. "I think so," he said finally. "The farm has taught me that we can handle more than we think we can, as long as we stay true to what makes this place special." The National Geographic article, when it was published 6 months later, brought visitors from as far away as Japan and Germany, people who had read about the authentic American farm experience and wanted to see it for themselves. Marcus found that the language barriers mattered less than he'd expected, that the universal appeal of fresh fruit, genuine hospitality, and connection to the land transcended cultural differences. The international attention also brought new opportunities. A documentary filmmaker from the BBC visited to create a short film about American family farms, featuring the Webb farm as an example of how traditional agriculture was adapting to modern challenges. The film, which aired across Europe and was later distributed online, brought even more international visitors and helped establish the farm as a destination for travelers seeking authentic cultural experiences. Marcus began offering special programs for international visitors, including overnight stays in renovated rooms on the second floor of the farmhouse, and multi-day experiences that allowed guests to participate in the full cycle of farm life. These extended visits were particularly popular with European travelers, who were fascinated by the differences between American and European agricultural traditions. The success of the agritourism venture also inspired other local farmers to consider similar transitions. Marcus found himself serving as an informal mentor to neighboring farm families who were struggling with their own economic challenges. He shared his experiences freely, helping others develop their own visitor programs and connecting them with the network of resources and contacts he'd built over the years. This spirit of collaboration led to the formation of the Central Georgia Farm Trail, a cooperative marketing effort that connected several local farms and agricultural attractions into a cohesive tourism destination. Visitors could now spend an entire weekend exploring different farms, each offering unique experiences, but all committed to showcasing authentic agricultural life in the region. The farm trail concept proved so successful that it was replicated in other parts of Georgia and eventually became a model for similar initiatives across the Southeast. Marcus was invited to serve on the State Agricultural Tourism Board, helping to develop policies and programs that supported small farms transitioning to agritourism. As his daughter Emma entered high school, she expressed interest in studying agricultural business and sustainable farming practices, with the goal of eventually returning to help manage and expand the family farm. This filled Marcus with a pride deeper than any financial success could provide, knowing that the farm would continue into a fifth generation with someone who understood both its traditional roots and its modern possibilities. Sarah, who had initially been skeptical of Marcus's agritourism venture, became one of its strongest supporters as she saw how it had transformed not just the farm's finances, but Marcus himself. Their co-parenting relationship improved dramatically, and she even began bringing potential visitors from her Atlanta social circle to experience the farm for themselves. The physical transformation of the property continued as well. Marcus added a small conference center and a renovated barn that could accommodate corporate retreats and educational seminars, bringing in business groups interested in team-building activities in a rural setting. He also created specialized gardens that showcased heritage vegetables and herbs, adding another educational component to the visitor experience. The peach orchard itself became more productive than it had been in years, not just because of the improved irrigation and care that increased income allowed, but because Marcus had rediscovered his passion for farming. When work feels meaningful and visitors appreciate the fruits of your labor both literally and figuratively, even the most challenging aspects of agricultural life become more bearable. Local media began featuring the farm regularly, not just as a tourist destination, but as an example of innovative rural entrepreneurship. Marcus was profiled in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, featured on Georgia Public Broadcasting, and invited to speak at economic development conferences about the potential for agritourism revitalize rural communities. The recognition extended beyond Georgia as well. Marcus received an invitation to speak at the National Small Farms Conference, sharing his story with farmers from across the country who were facing similar challenges. His presentation, titled, "From Crisis to Community: How Hospitality Saved Our Family Farm," was one of the most popular sessions at the conference and led to consulting opportunities with other agricultural operations. The consulting work became another revenue stream for the farm, as Marcus helped other farmers develop their own agritourism programs. He was careful to maintain the authenticity that had made his own farm successful, helping each client identify their unique stories and strengths, rather than trying to replicate his exact model. The success also allowed Marcus to give back to his community in ways he'd never been able to afford before. The farm began hosting fundraising events for local schools and charities, donating portions of tour proceeds to community organizations, and providing internships for local high school students interested in agriculture or hospitality. One of the most meaningful developments was the establishment of the Webb Farm Educational Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provided grants to other small farms developing educational programs. The foundation was funded partly by donations from visitors who had been moved by their farm experience and wanted to support similar operations elsewhere. Isabella's role in the farm's success was recognized when she received a travel writing award specifically for her original article about the Webb farm. In her acceptance speech, she talked about how the best travel writing came from genuine human connections, from being open to unexpected encounters and recognizing the extraordinary within the ordinary. During the awards ceremony, which Marcus attended as Isabella's guest, she introduced him to other travel writers and tourism professionals who were interested in featuring authentic agricultural experiences in their own work. These connections led to additional media coverage and helped establish the farm as a case study in successful agritourism development. As Marcus's 5th year in the agritourism business began, he reflected on how completely his life had changed since that evening when a stranger had asked to charge her phone on his porch. The farm that had once been a source of constant stress and financial worry was now a thriving business that supported not just his family, but an entire network of employees, suppliers, and partner businesses. More importantly, the farm had become a place of joy and connection, where strangers became friends over shared stories and sweet tea, where children discovered where their food came from, where couples celebrated anniversaries and families created memories. Every day brought new faces and new stories, but the essential character of the place remained the same, rooted in the hospitality and authenticity that had first attracted Isabella's attention. The peach trees that had once seemed like a burden were now the stars of countless photographs, their seasonal changes marking the rhythm of the farm's year and providing a beautiful backdrop for the thousands of visitors who came to experience authentic Southern agriculture. The farmhouse that had grown too quiet after Sarah and Emma left was now filled with laughter and conversation as visitors from around the world gathered on the front porch to share stories and enjoy fresh peaches. As he sat on that same porch one evening, watching another spectacular Georgia sunset paint the sky behind his orchard, while a family from Germany marveled at the sweetness of tree-ripened peaches, Marcus felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought him to this moment. The crisis that had once threatened to destroy his family's legacy had instead become the catalyst for its transformation and renewal. The lesson he'd learned was simple but powerful. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is open your door to a stranger, share what you have, and trust that kindness has the power to change everything. What had started with a phone charger and a glass of sweet tea had become a testament to the enduring power of authentic hospitality and the magic that happens when people take the time to truly see and appreciate each other. The Webb family farm, now entering its 2nd century of operation, was not just surviving, but setting an example for how traditional agriculture could adapt and thrive in the modern world. The future that had once seemed so uncertain now stretched ahead with limitless possibilities, built on the foundation of stories shared, connections made, and the simple but profound truth that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with the most ordinary acts of human kindness. As the stars began to appear in the Georgia sky, and the German family headed back to their accommodations in town, promising to return the next day for the full farm tour, Marcus smiled and began planning the improvements and new programs he wanted to implement in the coming year. The farm that had almost been lost was now more valuable than it had ever been, not just financially, but in the immeasurable currency of human connection and shared experience. The story that had started with a dying phone battery and a request for help had become a living testament to the power of seeing opportunity in unexpected places, of finding value in what you already have, and of never underestimating the impact that simple human kindness can have on the world. Isabella's visit had lasted only a few hours, but its effects would continue to ripple outward for generations, touching the lives of everyone who came to experience the magic of the Webb family farm and the authentic hospitality that had made it all possible. As Marcus's sixth year in the agritourism business unfolded, new opportunities continued to emerge from unexpected directions. A major food network discovered the farm through one of Isabella's social media posts and approached Marcus about featuring the farm in a television series about authentic American food experiences. The show, called Roots and Routes, would follow the journey of ingredients from farm to table, and the producers wanted to feature Marcus's peaches in an episode about southern desserts and preserves. The television crew spent 3 days at the farm, filming everything from sunrise over the orchard, to families picking peaches, to Marcus sharing stories on the front porch. The producers were particularly interested in his grandmother's sweet tea recipe and convinced him to demonstrate the preparation process on camera, explaining the precise timing and techniques that had been passed down through his family for generations. When the episode aired 6 months later, it reached an audience of over 2 million viewers. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The farm's phone rang continuously for weeks, with people wanting to book visits, and Marcus had to hire his first full-time employee, a local woman named Patricia, who had experience in hospitality management and could help coordinate the increasing volume of visitor bookings. Patricia brought fresh ideas and professional experience that helped Marcus refine his operations without losing the authentic character that made the farm special. She developed a more sophisticated reservation system, created detailed visitor guidelines that ensured everyone had a positive experience, and established partnerships with local bed and breakfasts and restaurants that could accommodate the overflow of visitors who wanted to extend their stay in the area. The television exposure also attracted the attention of several major corporations, looking for unique venues for executive retreats and team-building events. Marcus was initially hesitant about hosting corporate groups, worried that they might not appreciate the farm's rural simplicity or that their presence might detract from the experience for regular visitors. However, Patricia convinced him to try a pilot program with a small technology company from Atlanta. The corporate retreat exceeded all expectations. The executives, most of whom had grown up in urban environments, were fascinated by every aspect of farm life. They participated enthusiastically in the peach picking, asked thoughtful questions during the historical tours, and spent hours on the front porch, engaging in the kind of deep, unstructured conversation that was rarely possible in their fast-paced business environment. The company's CEO was so impressed with the experience that he became an advocate for the farm, recommending it to other business leaders and eventually commissioning Marcus to speak at a major business conference about the lessons that corporate leaders could learn from sustainable agriculture and authentic hospitality. This corporate speaking opportunity opened yet another revenue stream for Marcus. His presentations, which combined stories from the farm with insights about customer service, community building, and finding opportunity in adversity, resonated strongly with business audiences. He began receiving regular invitations to speak at conferences, leadership seminars, and business schools across the Southeast. The speaking engagements not only provided additional income, but also elevated the farm's profile in unexpected circles. Business journals began featuring articles about the farm as a case study in rural entrepreneurship and authentic branding. Harvard Business School even developed a case study based on the farm's transformation, using it to teach students about innovative approaches to agricultural business. Meanwhile, Emma's involvement in the farm continued to grow. Now, in her senior year of high school, she had developed her own social media presence, sharing behind-the-scenes glimpses of farm life that attracted a younger demographic to the farm's visitor base. Her Instagram account, which featured everything from sunrise photos over the peach trees to videos of baby chicks in the heritage breed chicken coop, had gained over 50,000 followers. Emma's social media success led to her own opportunities. Several agricultural colleges offered her scholarships based on her demonstrated passion for sustainable farming and her innovative use of digital marketing to promote agricultural tourism. She ultimately chose to attend the University of Georgia's College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences, with plans to study agricultural business, and eventually return to help expand the family operation. The farm's success also began attracting investment interest from outside parties. A major hospitality company approached Marcus about partnering to develop a luxury glamping experience on the property, offering upscale accommodations that would allow visitors to stay overnight while maintaining the authentic farm atmosphere. After careful consideration and consultation with Isabella and other trusted advisors, Marcus decided to move forward with a small-scale pilot program. The glamping project involved converting a section of the property into a carefully designed camping area with luxury tents that featured comfortable beds, private bathrooms, and climate control while maintaining a rustic aesthetic that complemented the farm's character. Each tent was positioned to take advantage of views over the peach orchard, and guests had access to all of the farm's regular programming, plus exclusive early morning and evening experiences. The glamping accommodations proved extremely popular, particularly with couples celebrating anniversaries or honeymoons, and with families wanting a unique vacation experience. The overnight guests formed deeper connections with the farm, often staying for multiple days and participating in seasonal activities like helping with the harvest or learning traditional preservation techniques. Isabella, who had become something of an unofficial ambassador for the farm, featured the glamping experience in another major article, this time for Travel Plus Leisure magazine. The piece, titled "Sleeping Under Georgia Stars, a Farm Stay That Redefines Luxury," emphasized how the accommodations enhanced rather than compromised the authentic farm experience. The success of the glamping venture led to additional expansion opportunities. Marcus began offering specialized workshops and multi-day experiences focused on specific aspects of farm life. A farm-to-table weekend taught participants about growing, harvesting, and preparing their own food. A heritage skills program introduced visitors to traditional crafts like canning, woodworking, and natural dyeing, using plants grown on the farm. These extended programs attracted participants from across the country and even internationally. A group of chefs from New York spent a week at the farm, learning about seasonal cooking and developing menus based on heritage vegetables and fruits. A delegation of agricultural students from Japan visited for 2 weeks to study sustainable farming practices and American agricultural history. The international programs led to Marcus being invited to participate in a cultural exchange program, visiting farms in Italy, France, and New Zealand to share his experiences with agritourism development and learn from other successful agricultural operations. These trips provided valuable insights that he brought back to improve his own operation, while also strengthening his understanding of the global movement towards sustainable agriculture and authentic travel experiences. The farm's reputation for educational programming also attracted partnerships with several universities and research institutions. Agricultural researchers began using the farm as a field site for studies on sustainable farming practices, heritage crop preservation, and rural tourism development. These partnerships brought graduate students and faculty to the farm regularly, adding an academic dimension to the visitor experience and keeping Marcus connected to the latest developments in agricultural science and rural development. As the farm entered its 7th year as an agritourism destination, Marcus reflected on how the operation had evolved far beyond anything he could have imagined when Isabella first knocked on his door. What had started as a simple farm tour had become a comprehensive rural experience that included accommodations, dining, education, and entertainment, while maintaining the authentic character that had attracted visitors in the first place. The financial transformation was remarkable. The farm that had once struggled to generate enough income to pay basic bills now employed 12 people full-time and provided part-time work for dozens of others in the local community. The agritourism operation generated more revenue than the traditional farming activities had ever produced, while also making the agricultural operations more profitable by providing a direct market for the farm's products. More significantly, the farm had become a catalyst for economic development throughout the region. The success of the Webb farm had inspired other local farmers to develop their own visitor programs. creating a network of agricultural attractions that collectively drew hundreds of thousands of visitors to the area each year. The increased tourism had supported the opening of new restaurants, shops, and accommodations in nearby towns, revitalizing communities that had been struggling with economic decline. Marcus's relationship with his community had also evolved significantly. He was now serving on the County Economic Development Board, the State Agricultural Tourism Committee, and several nonprofit organizations focused on rural development and heritage preservation. His voice carried weight in discussions about agricultural policy and rural economic development, and he frequently found himself advocating for other small farmers and rural businesses. The personal relationships that had developed through the farm were perhaps the most rewarding aspect of the entire experience. Marcus had formed genuine friendships with visitors from around the world, many of whom returned annually and had become like extended family. Children who had visited the farm as toddlers were now teenagers who brought their own friends to experience the place that had been part of their childhood memories. Isabella remained one of his closest friends and advisors, visiting the farm several times each year and continuing to write about it for various publications. She had also become something of a matchmaker, introducing Marcus to other people in the travel and hospitality industry who shared his values and could offer valuable insights and opportunities. The romantic relationship that had developed with the local teacher had evolved into a serious partnership. Linda, who taught environmental science at the county high school, brought her own expertise in education and sustainability to the farm's programs. She had developed several curriculum-based programs that brought school groups to the farm throughout the year, and she was instrumental in the farm's certification as an environmental education site. Their relationship represented another kind of harvest from the seeds that had been planted that evening, when Marcus had offered hospitality to a stranger. Linda understood and shared his commitment to the land and to education. And together, they were planning not just a future for themselves, but for the continued growth and development of the farm, as both an agricultural operation and an educational resource. As Marcus stood on his front porch one evening, watching the sunset through the peach trees, while Linda prepared dinner in the kitchen and Emma video called from her college dorm room to share news about her latest agricultural business project, he felt a profound sense of completion. The farm that had once felt like a burden had become the foundation for a rich, connected life that honored the past while building toward the future. The phone charger that Isabella had needed to borrow seemed like such a small thing in retrospect, but it had been the key that unlocked everything that followed. It reminded Marcus that the most important moments in life often came disguised as ordinary encounters, that kindness was never wasted, and that sharing what you have with others was the surest path to abundance. The Webb family farm was now more than just a successful business. It was a testament to the enduring power of authentic hospitality, the magic of genuine human connection, and the unexpected ways that opening your door to a stranger can transform not just your own life, but the lives of countless others who follow in their footsteps.